Psalm 67, to the chief musician on Neginoth, a psalm, a song. May God be merciful unto us and bless us and cause his face to shine upon us. Selah. Okay, so this is a prayer. It's a request. And Neginoth, that means stringed instruments. And the author is not specified, but it begins with this request, this prayer for the people. And it's actually very similar to the priestly blessing that the Lord instructed Aaron to put upon the people. Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 through 26. However, here it begins with mercy. In Numbers 6, it's the Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. But here it is, may God be merciful unto us and bless us. So it begins with mercy, which is an appropriate way to go because the blessing of God begins with his mercy. And the blessing is what follows. Once someone has received his mercy, we come to the throne of grace, and there we obtain mercy and find grace to help in time of need. So verse 2, that your way may be known upon the earth, your saving power among all nations. So this is a psalm, a song about the nations, about the Lord and the news of him, his revelation going out to all the different nations, all the different ethnicities, the different families of the world. And here is the reason. The Lord's blessing causes his people to testify, and the message is to all the nations. That your way, bless us, that your way may be known. So the blessing of God upon Israel communicates a message to all the nations. And then verse 3, let the nations praise you, O God. Let all the nations praise you. So the nations refers to what you read about in Genesis chapter 10, the table of nations, all of the various families of the earth that went out in all directions. And the blessing of God is through his people. And that's how the Lord has always worked, through his people out to everyone else. And then you read the word God, Elohim. It's God, a generic name for God, instead of the Lord, all capital letters, because this is going out to the nations, and this is a title, a name for God that is more suited for that. The word Lord, all capitals, that speaks of the covenant that the Lord has with his people. And in Psalms that are addressed to his people, you find that word. And so, verse 4, oh, let the nations be glad and sing for joy, for you shall judge the people righteously and govern the nations upon the earth. Selah, Selah, stop and think about that. And so, let the nations be glad and sing for joy. The blessing of God produces joy and gladness. And again, this psalm goes out to all the nations. This is an exhortation for everyone. And it was the expectation of Israel that the Lord would rule the earth, and that is described in Revelation chapter 20, the kingdoms of this world, and also Revelation 11:15. The kingdoms of this world have become the kingdoms of our Lord and of his Christ. Revelation 11:15. Let the nations praise you, O God. Let all the nations praise you. So this is a repeat of verse 3. It's a refrain. It must have sounded great put to music, and Israel was known for music, and we can just imagine. So the peoples or the nations, both describing the same thing in both clauses. The second clause, let the nations praise you, let all the nations. So the second clause is more emphatic, or has a greater emphasis on everyone. Verse 6, then shall the earth yield her increase, and God, even our own God, shall bless us. So the bountiful harvest is from the Lord, not from Baal or anyone else, but the Lord is the one who who brings the blessings and even the harvest. And so the blessing of God comes, and all of the world benefits, and this is ultimately fulfilled in the millennium, the millennial reign of Christ, Revelation chapter 20. And right now, the whole of creation is groaning under the stress of sin, but it will one day be delivered. And, Lord, haste the day when our faith shall be sight. The clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so it is well with our souls. So verse 7, God shall bless us, and all the ends of the earth shall fear him. So that's a message that goes out in all directions to everyone. And the blessing of God is through his people to the rest of the world. It's one reason why missionary work is so important. Romans chapter 10, verses 13 and following. Everyone who calls upon the name of the Lord will be saved. That's Romans 10:13. But then Paul goes on to talk about how are they going to call on someone that they've never heard about? Someone needs to go and tell them the message of good news. Okay, so the good news about Jesus, who is salvation, which is what people need. This is Psalm 67.